A bombshell claim has sent shock waves through the Trump family, as bombsa Jasmine Crockett has made a statement about Ivanka that has visibly put even President Trump on edge. Could the story we thought we knew about their relationship be hiding a truly shocking secret? The chamber was already buzzing that day, a palpable undercurrent of tension filling the air. This wasn't just another routine session. Everyone present sensed something significant was on the cusp of unfolding. Lawmakers shifted restlessly in their seats, whispering amongst themselves, exchanging uneasy glances. The topic being debated was heated, certainly, but no one could have predicted just how astonishing the proceedings were about to become. Then, Jasmine Crockett rose to her feet. Crockett has never been one to mince words or shy away from a confrontation. She carries herself with an undeniable presence, sharp, direct, and supremely confident. The kind of individual whose very demeanor signals that when she speaks, people truly listen. That day, her gaze swept across the room, lingering momentarily. On the section where Trump's allies were seated, she held her pause, allowing the low murmur of conversation to gradually fade into an expectant silence. The silence in the chamber grew heavy, almost suffocating. And then she spoke. Her voice was steady, controlled, yet undeniably firm. 8 made a statement about Ivanka Trump that profoundly challenged the public's understanding of her role and relationship to the president. The words landed with an undeniable visceral impact. At first, no one moved. It was as if the very air had been sucked from the room. Some froze, mouths half up in disbelief. Others shifted uneasily in their chairs, clearly unsure if they had heard correctly. A few offered nervous, almost reflexive laughs, but the tension didn't ease. It only thickened. The assertion was clear, precise, and meant to be taken with utmost seriousness. Crockett wasn't speculating or joking. She spoke deliberately, leaving no room for ambiguity. Whispers erupted. Throughout the chamber, a sudden cacophony of hushed voices. Lawmakers leaned toward one another, covering their mouths as they spoke, their eyes darting nervously toward Trump's section. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, pens scratching rapidly across paper. Even the usually unflappable aides in the back paused, frozen by the gravity of what they'd just heard. Trump's allies shifted uneasily, a few muttering under their breath, but no one immediately challenged her. The way to the claim was too potent, too clear's throat unusual, too utterly unexpected. Crockett, aware of the ripple she had caused, didn't falter. She didn't soften her stance. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her voice firm as she added, "And for those who have doubts, understand this. I have official documents to support my statement." The reaction was immediate. Official documents, not rumors, not speculation, but evidence. This was no longer just a dramatic line in a speech. It was a major assertion that demanded immediate attention. People turned to each other, eyes wide, whispering urgently. Some immediately demanded to see the evidence. Others shook their heads, insisting it couldn't possibly be true. Yet Crockett remained utterly composed, almost as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. In that instant, the chamber felt less like a legislative hall and more like a courtroom, where a surprising accusation had just been presented. It was a stage where a single statement could shift the entire conversation. Her power wasn't in the volume of her voice. It came from the silence that followed each word, the way people collectively processed what she had said. And as the whispers grew, a single unsettling question hovered over the room. What if she was telling the truth? Trump's previous controversial remarks about Ivanka were already public knowledge, deeply ingrained in the collective memory. People remembered his interviews, his often usual comments about her appearance, and the distinct way he spoke about her in past media appearances. So now Crockett's words didn't fall into empty space. Instead, they landed on a public record already colored by unusual statements and a persistent public curiosity about the dynamics of their relationship. Some lawmakers immediately avoided eye contact, staring intently at their papers as though the floor might open up beneath them. Others exchanged knowing looks, silently acknowledging that this revelation was utterly unlike anything discussed before. And in that electrifying moment, one thing became crystal clear. Jasmine Crockett had profoundly shifted the entire atmosphere in the room. No matter how quickly some tried to downplay it, no matter how strongly allies might respond, the words had been spoken. The understanding of Ivanka Trump's role and connection to Donald Trump had been challenged. And once words like that are out there, once such a significant question is raised, they don't disappear. They resonate. They linger. They leave indelible. Questions that no denial can completely erase. The moment Jasmine Crockett's words left her mouth, the chamber felt undeniably different. Like a spark igniting a dry forest, the reaction was immediate and widespread. People weren't just surprised by the assertion itself. They were stunned because deep down many had already heard statements, interviews, and media sound bites that made her revelation feel, at least in some unsettling way, plausible. Everyone vividly remembered how Donald Trump had spoken about Ivanka. Over the years, it was rarely ordinary. Wasn't the kind of language most fathers typically use about their daughters. The most striking memory that resurfaced for many was from a television interview. Trump, ever casual and confident, had famously said, "If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dadding her." The audience had laughed nervously at the time. The interviewer had chuckled, clearly unsure how to respond. Trump had merely smirked, visibly enjoying the attention. That statement had lingered, replayed in clips over the years, serving as a persistent reminder of the unusual way he often discussed his own family. Then there were his numerous appearances on talk shows. Those who followed interviews from 2004 and 2006 remembered some of his more controversial remarks. Comments that generated widespread public criticism. Words that sparked intense discussion about boundaries and propriety. Those statements traveled far, plastered across headlines, dissected on radio shows, and whispered about in households across the country. To some, they revealed Trump's unvarnished style in casual settings. To others, they were simply part of his larger-than-life personality. But for anyone truly paying attention, the remarks never entirely felt normal. Trump didn't stop at words about dating possibilities. He often praised Ivanka's appearance in public interviews, frequently mentioning her height and general attractiveness. Some of his phrasing drew particular criticism and scrutiny, especially from commentators who found it remarkably unusual for a father to speak about his daughter in such a manner. For many, these comments were deeply uncomfortable. They were genuinely concerning. For almost everyone, they were utterly unforgettable. Now imagine sitting in that chamber, hearing Crockett stand up and make a statement about Ivanka. Trump that profoundly challenges established perceptions. Statements that once seemed merely awkward or strange now carried an entirely new heavy weight. Lawmakers exchanged quick glances, their expressions silently reflecting the same unsettling thought. Could this new claim actually explain the pattern of Trump's statements over the years? Could it shed a completely different light on his unusual commentary? The true power of Crockett's statement wasn't only in what she had just said. It was in how it seamlessly connected to publicly documented statements made by Trump himself, words spoken on television, on the radio, before vast audiences, words that were impossible to ignore and which the public had in truth never entirely forgotten. Every time Trump made a new comment about Ivanka in interviews or media appearances, those old remarks inevitably resurfaced online, replayed, dissected, and analyzed. They had become an undeniable part of the public's awareness of the unique Trump family dynamics. So when Crockett presented her assertion, the room didn't hear only her voice. They heard it layered over years of Trump's own words, comments, and interviews. This pre-existing context profoundly amplified her statement, making it resonate far more strongly than an isolated claim ever could. Suddenly, those past statements were no longer isolated incidents. They became part of a broader, more intricate narrative, one that compelled people to pause and deeply reconsider everything. That's precisely why the impact was so sharp. Crockett didn't need to shout. She didn't need to demand attention. She simply connected a new profound claim to a long public history of statements, and the connection itself carried immense force. The whispers in the chamber were no longer just about Crockett. They were about Trump, his behavior, and the unsettling patterns in his words. Legislators silently ran through years of interviews and quotes in their minds, asking questions they weren't yet ready to voice aloud. Could this explain the perceived closeness between father and daughter? Could it explain her significant influence in his decision-making? Could it even shed light on a bond that had often seemed unusually strong, even unconventional? Oh, no one dared to speak these questions openly, yet their presence hung in the room, palpable, heavy. Crockett stood tall, observing the profound ripple effect of her statement unfold across the faces of her colleagues. She had masterfully used publicly known statements to frame her assertion, a way that made it utterly impossible to ignore. Words over time can fade, but when they are placed in the right context, when a spark is struck, they can ignite renewed and intense attention. That day, Crockett had struck precisely that spark, and the reaction was spreading like wildfire. The whispers still bounced off the chamber walls when Jasmine Crockett calmly raised her hand for silence. Her face was serene, almost too serene. This wasn't the look of someone idly tossing out a random accusation. This was the look of someone holding truly significant information close to her chest, fully aware of the absolute attention she had captured. And then she delivered the words that made every head in the room snap toward her. "I have documents, official records, verification." A profound ripple swept through the room. Gasps, murmurs, a few skeptical, nervous chuckles. The words documents and verification carried a weight no one could possibly ignore. Up until that very moment, some had assumed her initial statement was simply dramatic, a rhetorical jab meant to unsettle Trump's allies. But now she was unequivocally claiming to possess official records. The chamber shifted, transitioning from surprise to outright disbelief. People craned their necks, straining to see if she actually held anything in her hands. Was she bluffing? Could any of this truly be real? Crockett didn't rush. She allowed the suspense to build, a palpable force in the room. She stood tall, hands resting casually on the desk, her gaze steady and unflinching as she began to elaborate. She spoke of government-issued records, of certificates, of legal documentation, pieces of paper recognized by the state, not by politics or fleeting public opinion. In her words, these were records that could profoundly illuminate long-standing questions about certain family dynamics and public roles. The murmurs grew louder, more agitated. Reporters' pens scratched even faster. Colleagues whispered urgently, leaning in conspiratorially. The word records moved, like an electric current through the room. Crockett didn't stop there. She mentioned other official documents, registrations, licenses, and filings that, according to her, could clarify intricate relationships and titles in ways previously unseen by the public. The silence that followed her pronouncements was heavy, pressing down on every shoulder. It wasn't empty. It was dense with curiosity, disbelief, and a mounting tension. Some of Trump's allies shouted back, their faces flushed, their voices echoing with indignation. Falsehoods. One cried. Another dismissed it as nothing but political theater, but their certainty sounded strangely shaky, as though even they were unsure just how far Crockett was prepared to go. Crockett didn't flinch. She looked directly at them and repeated with unnerving calm, "I have the documents." Her unwavering certainty rattled even the most hardened doubters. All eyes instinctively turned toward Donald Trump. He sat rigidly, jaw clenched, clearly attempting to maintain an impossible composure under the harsh chamber lights. His advisors leaned in, whispering frantically and gesturing urgently. It was clear this had swiftly shifted from mere political noise to something that demanded immediate, serious attention. And yet Crockett pressed on. She described the records not merely as proof, but as crucial pieces of a much broader story, one that she implied explained intricate patterns of public perception and influence. She painted a vivid picture of carefully managed appearances, suggesting that what the public had seen didn't necessarily tell the full underlying truth. She didn't wave papers dramatically in the air. She didn't need to. The mere suggestion of their existence was enough. The room buzzed with a torrent of new questions. Where did she get these records? Were they authentic? Who else might know? Even hardened skeptics couldn't ignore the profound weight of the assertion. The seed of doubt had been firmly planted, and doubt once sown grows at an alarming speed. Some lawmakers remained utterly frozen, staring blankly ahead. Others leaned in conspiratorially to whisper to colleagues. The press gallery hummed with a frenetic energy, cameras clicking, recorders running nonstop. And through it all, Crockett remained perfectly poised, a faint, almost imperceptible trace of satisfaction in her eyes. She didn't need to present every single document on the chamber floor. She only needed to suggest the tantalizing possibility enough to make people imagine, enough to make the entire room question, enough to keep attention irrevocably fixed on the unfolding story. She knew was the true power of official records. You don't always need to show them. The mere possibility alone can irrevocably shift perception, provoke deep thought, and spark widespread conversation. And that day, Jasmine Crockett did precisely that. As the chamber buzzed with the sheer weight of Jasmine Crockett's words, a new fundamental question began to coalesce in every mind. Why? Why would anyone go to such extraordinary lengths to meticulously manage their public image? Why keep something potentially controversial, hidden, obscured from public view? Crockett's voice, steady and sharp, cut through the escalating murmurs. "You want to know why?" she asked, her eyes sweeping across the wrapped room. "I'll tell you why." The room collectively leaned in, captivated. She began to paint a compelling picture, not about personal scandal, but about carefully constructed public perception. According to her, the underlying focus wasn't simply family, was about strategy, influence, and the absolute control of the narrative. "Think about it," she said, raising her hand for emphasis. "What wins sympathy? What earns trust? A politician with a supportive, seemingly conventional family standing firmly by their side. It looks wholesome. That looks relatable. It looks safe, heads nodded, even among those hesitant to admit the obvious. The image of Trump with Ivanka consistently by his side had been a fixture for years. On campaign trails, at business meetings, even inside the White House. The smiling daughter supporting the father was a picture meticulously framed for public consumption. But Crockett continued, "Imagine if that picture were different. Imagine if the actual story behind that image weren't what the public assumed." The words landed heavily, undeniably. The chamber went silent, a new, profound realization dawning. On many, suddenly, the carefully crafted image of the family could be seen not as organic, but as a deliberate, calculated strategy. Questions that had once seemed irrelevant now demanded serious consideration. That, Crockett said firmly, is precisely why appearances matter. That's why narratives are so diligently managed. She meticulously broke it down piece by piece like a seasoned prosecutor laying out irrefutable evidence before a jury. Her first motive shaping public perception. Families, she explained, are powerful political symbols. Politicians are judged not just by their policies, but by the carefully constructed story their families tell. Supportive traditional family unit creates warmth and relatability. A complicated, unconventional image, however, invites uncomfortable questions and intense scrutiny. Her second motive, controlling the narrative. By meticulously managing the public's perception, a politician can dictate precisely how their story is told. The media and the public are expertly guided toward the intended message, ensuring the image remains pristine in any difficult questions remain muted. Her third motive, minimizing scrutiny. Complex stories inherently invite examination and often unwanted intrusion. Simplifying appearances and adhering to a familiar, reassuring narrative shields the individual from unnecessary controversy and damaging speculation. Her fourth motive, creating a protective image. Strong, conventional family bonds are culturally revered, making questioning them seem almost taboo. Carefully curated public images can effectively discourage critics and subtly soften opposition. Her fifth motive, social acceptance. Traditional family images deeply resonate with broad audiences, conveying cherished values and a sense of stability. A consistent public presentation helps to maintain crucial support and deftly avoid unwanted judgment. Crockett laid it all out like intricate puzzle pieces, snapping perfectly into place. Each motive built seamlessly on the last, revealing not a sensational scandal, but a coldly calculated approach to influence and perception. The chamber grew restless. Some shook their heads, still unwilling to fully believe it. Others leaned back, thoughtfully absorbing the chilling strategy she had just described. Then she delivered her final poignant point. "This isn't just about appearances," she said quietly, her words carrying immense weight in their unnerving calmness. "It's about profound influence. It's about meticulously crafted image. It's about the deliberate choices people make to maintain absolute control and the public. They often unknowingly only see what's meant to be seen." Echoed through the chamber, stark reminder that public perception is a powerfully managed construct, and that every public image tells a carefully selected story. Crockett had taken the discussion further than anyone expected. She wasn't accusing anyone personally. She was exposing with surgical precision how narratives and appearances can be orchestrated. And now that intricate strategy was laid bare for all to see. The room was still buzzing with a low hum when the full weight of Jasmine Crockett's claims truly began to settle. But for one person in particular, there was no hum, no buzz, only a cold, creeping panic. Donald Trump. He sat rigidly in his chair, shoulders tight, his eyes darting frantically. The calm, commanding aura he usually projected was visibly infracturing, thin lines of stress forming in his face with every passing heartbeat. Advisors whispered urgently in his ear, but he barely registered their words. The vast room seemed to shrink, encompassing only him and the terrifying possibility that everything he had painstakingly built. The image, a carefully curated family story, his impenetrable political armor was now unraveling before his very eyes. Trump's first instinct was immediate, forceful denial. His voice sharp and clipped, cut abruptly through the murmurs. "This is false," he declared. "Completely false." But even as he spoke, the words lacked their usual authoritative force. Denial, he knew, could only go so far when Crockett had so confidently claimed to possess documents, certificates, and IDs, irrefutable proof that, if real, couldn't simply be brushed aside. He rose abruptly, packing in short, frustrated bursts. His hands sliced through the air as if swatting at invisible critics. Advisors leaned even closer, murmuring frantic strategies. How to spin it, how to discredit her, how to regain control. But even they sensed the profound fragility of the moment. Meanwhile, the whispers throughout the chamber grew louder, more speculative. Every journalist, every politician, every aide, everyone began to envision the dramatic scenario. Ivanka in a role that profoundly challenged public perception, a connection far beyond what was commonly understood. The carefully crafted public image that had been presented for years now hung in a delicate balance, visibly teetering toward collapse. Ivanka herself remained unusually silent, her expression unreadable, a complex mix of shock, discomfort, and perhaps calculation. She did not rush to defend or deny. That profound silence only added more fuel to the rampant speculation, making the unfolding story feel even more real, more immediate. People leaned forward in their seats, straining to catch every micro-expression. Trump then tried a different tactic, distraction. He launched into a familiar rhythm of speeches, highlighting past accomplishments, pivoting swiftly to policy. Desperately trying to pull attention away from Crockett's bombshell revelation, but the strategy faltered, utterly ineffective. Room wasn't listening. Their minds were. Replaying the words over and over. Documents, proof, official records, and it stretched into what felt like hours. Beads of sweat appeared at Trump's temple, and his usual impenetrable confidence visibly faltered under the relentless, crushing weight of uncertainty. Every aide, every advisor, every hushed whisper now felt magnified, echoing ominously. Panic wasn't just public. It was acutely, undeniably personal. Then came moments of quiet, intense calculation. Trump's famously sharp mind, even under such profound stress, began to frantically weigh his options. Should he launch a direct personal attack on Crockett? Should he relentlessly question the validity of her documents? Or should he double down, vehemently insisting Ivanka was always his daughter, and that no evidence could ever truly change that foundational narrative? Each potential option carried immense risk. Each choice was a treacherous potential trap. The panic morphed into a churning storm inside his chest, one he could neither calm nor ignore. Meanwhile, reporters scribbled notes faster than ever before. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing every nervous twitch, every minute micro-reaction. Questions began to form in every corner of the room, blossoming like insidious weeds. How long had this potential secret existed? Who else was privy to it? What did Ivanka herself truly think or know? Could this revelation completely upend his political power, entirely reshape his legacy? By the time the chamber slowly began to settle, it was unequivocally clear the world had irrevocably shifted. Trump's impenetrable aura of control had cracked, perhaps only slightly. But Crockett had undeniably exposed a vulnerability few had ever witnessed. Panic was no longer private. It was starkly, disturbingly public, visible in his gestures, his strained words, and the suffocating tension that stubbornly refused to leave the room. And even as the room slowly emptied, one chilling truth remained. Certain the story was far from over. The questions would not cease. The reactions would ripple far beyond the immediate walls of the chamber, its profoundly touching politics, media, and every corner of public imagination. Trump's panic wasn't merely about his reputation. It was about survival, political, personal, and profoundly strategic. Crockett's audacious revelation had struck directly at the very heart of the meticulously constructed image he had built. And for the first time in years, that image was now terrifyingly vulnerable. The room buzzed with lingering questions, the documents unverified yet intensely feared. The truth, or at least the compelling perception of it, had already made its indelible mark. And somewhere in the unsettling silence that followed, Trump knew with a sinking certainty that the game had shifted forever. So, what do you think? Was Jasmine Crockett using a calculated exaggeration to make an unforgettable point? Or is there truly more to this story, a deeper, more profound truth than anyone currently dares to admit? Share your thoughts below. This one, without a shadow of a doubt, is far from